Hello everyone, hello here, hello over there in Africa and all the diaspora around the world. We are back with Ellie Naimal Weekly News Report on what is going on around the world, mainly in Africa, including some reports here as well in the US. And we're gonna bring you guys some updates that we have discovered. If you guys remember the assassination of the Haiti's president, Jovenel Moise, who was assassinated in his home. Last few days ago, his wife spoke out on her perspective during the assassination and during the attack and how bad it was for her. It has been very traumatizing, and this is what she has to say. On her report, during the attack at night, this was in their home on July 7th, and her husband was shot dead next to her, and she was shot in the arm. During the attack, the wife of Haiti assassinated president said she managed to live because she lay still on the floor during the attack, and the hitman thought that they had killed her already. She also said that when the gunfire started, she woke up her two children to take them to safety, making sure that they were all right, and told them to hide in the bathroom. So the children survived the attack. During the interview with New York Times published on Friday, she also said that the killers left. One shined a flashlight on her to make sure if she was dead or still alive, and apparently checking if she was alive. And then they left thinking that she was dead already. And this is her report on her speaking out last few days ago. She said the killer shot her husband beside her on their bed. The only thing that she saw was they killed him, and where his boots, and only saw his boots laying there. So it's definitely a really disturbing massacre that took place there in the home, and something that she will have to live and endure for the rest of her lives. And as soon as she closed her eyes throughout the whole attack, finally opened it, and then the hitman left and no longer saw anything anymore. She assumed that the hitman, what caused them to make such a really brutal action is for finances, that they are probably looking for money or just another way to rob as much as they can. And some of these were already detained, as we reported in our last report. Several Colombians, Haitians, and also Haitians Americans as well. Now going on to the next report, a funeral met with the protester. This was the funeral of the president who was assassinated as well, the Haitian president. So meanwhile, in Cape Haven, Haiti, on July 23rd, they organized a funeral for his burial, and to return his body to his hometown on Friday for a private funeral, following with a heavy security. As the ceremony began, hundreds of protests clashed against the police, with the police outside the private residence. There were shots, tear gas, and black smoke sweeping up the ceremony. Following in the violent cries of the protests and fears of political volatility in the Caribbean nation. And these are some of the protesters who just had enough of all the crimes and all the bad things that's been happening in Haiti there. And some of them cried out, saying things like, you didn't take any measure to save Jovenel. You contributed to his death. One woman yelled, along with the verbal threats like, you need to leave now or we are going after you after the funeral. So these were some of the threats that were made. On Thursday, the demonstration continued as the violent rise hit neighbors in Cape Haven, as the groups of men fired shots into the air and blocked some roads with blazing tires. In some of the images, as you search it up, some of the tires were set on fires, cars that were set on fires for the people to express their anger. One heavily guarded police convoy carrying unknown officials drove through the flaming barricade with a vehicle which nearly flipped over. This is how bad the people have reacted during the funeral. And then a priest who had resided at the cathedral to honor Moise warned there was too much bloodshed in Haiti as he asked people to find peace. Noting that the poorest communities has been badly affected. And authorities have said at least 26 suspects have been arrested in the killing, including 18 former Colombian soldiers. Police are still looking for several more suspects. They said they were involved in the assassination plot as well, including a former rebel leader and an ex-senator. So more developing stories to come on that. Now moving on to what's going on in Mozambique, another country located there in Africa, closer to South Africa. There has been some tragedy, very horrific stories going on there for a while now. And this has been one of the darkest moments of Mozambique in some time now. And this was a war and a fight against the terrorist groups that are taking over territories in some of the cities there in Mozambique as well. And they are also no different than ISIS, basically an African version of ISIS. The same as you would see in Syria is the same thing that is taking on in Mozambique. And many civilians are now in fear and have been living in fear since all of this has been happening, and also fleeing homes and hiding in bushes as well. Now, in the last few days, foreign troops were sent to reinforce local security forces in Mozambique, which have clashed with the Islamist militias for the first time. As the conflict in the East African country moves into a new and partially dangerous pace at this time going forward. Rwandan soldiers who recently arrived in Mozambique fought a series of engagements against the extremists last week. For few reliable details of the fighting, which took place near the Mozambique border with Tanzania, have emerged, but officials claim that the suffering dozens of casualties continue as well. Now, just recently, South Africa decided to send 1,495 troops to Mozambique to help protect the citizens as the regional force, in which they are aimed at on the emergencies on what is going on in the country at the moment. This was also announced and written back by the Parliament on Wednesday and was authorized by the President of South Africa on July 23rd as a letter to the Speaker of the Parliament and the National Council to deploy troops. So the deployment will last for 4 months, which is from July 15 all the way until August 15. With the high cost of rubies, South African money or finances. Other countries have also got involved to deploy their troops as well, from Botswana, Angola, and Rwanda. The fight against the Islamic State terrorist group is now at high stakes, and hoping that the citizens will be able to return home to safety rather than hiding in the bushes. Some of the challenge that they have been facing for a couple of months now is trying to escape some of the deadly massacres that are taking place, being shot fired at and beheading, and also just being killed in a broad daylight. So they fear their life, including for their children, as well as they run into the bushes to hide as much as they can. And many of them are still there. And with a lot of these problems that are still currently taking on in Mozambique is rising up a lot of the collapse on the economy, and also the humanitarian crisis, which is on a rise for starvation as well. Many that have been able to return back have no food to eat. and have been going days without food. So hopefully with the deploy with the militaries from South Africa and the neighboring country, trying to help the citizens and protect them as much as they can, will be able to have some relief on these civilians as well. Now going on what's going on here in the Western world. The breaking news of the mutation of the coronavirus, there's a new variant going around called Delta. Now, to give you guys a little bit more information about Delta, it is a COVID-19 mutation that is raising new concerns of spreading faster, and it's a virus that is even stronger. So Delta is now the new worries to many doctors, specialists, and also to the CDC guidelines as well, which is considered to be as contagious like SARS-CoV-2 virus strand, which was the first defined in India in last December. It then swept rapidly through the country and Great Britain before reaching the US, if you guys remember those reports, where it is now the dominant variant. The CDC also described that Delta is more transmissible than the common cold and influenza, as well as the virus that causes Ebola, smallpox, MERS, and SARS, and in which, if you guys remember Ebola, it was a very contagious virus, just like chickenpox, as that's the comparison of how fast Delta can spread from human to human. And it was documented and reported by New York Times as well. The highest spread of the cases and severe outcomes is happening in places with low vaccination rates, and virtually at hospitalizations and death have been among the unvaccinated. This was reported by the CDC. And some of the deeper detail on how bad this virus could be from some of the PhD medical reported that all viruses evolve over time and undergo changes as they spread and replicate. But one thing that is unique about Delta is how quickly it spreads around the world and will certainly accelerate the pandemic, which is a possibility. The doctors are also saying that the people who are fully vaccinated against the coronavirus appears to have protection against Delta. But anyone who is unvaccinated and not practicing protective strategies is at risk for infection by the new variant. Now, with the new variant and some of the infections on the rise and taking people's life, there has been a report of new mandate for either vaccine or face mask. And this was one of the report last week where Biden spoke out a few days ago on the vaccine and mask mandate, announcing that every federal government employees and on-site contractor must update their vaccination status or will be required to wear a mask on the job no matter what their geographic locations are, physical distance from all the other employees and visitors, and follow weekly or twice by a screening testing, which is also required in all workplaces, and to be subject to restrictions on any official travels that you have coming up in the near future. And this is the release announcement by the White House. In the federal government field, with employees of more than 4 million Americans, including over 2 million in the federal civil workforce, throughout our country and across the world, these rules will apply to all Americans as well, following after. The Biden administration will encourage employers across the private sector to follow these strong models. They are also introducing the Department of Defense to mandate the vaccine for the U.S. military as well. And in exchange to those individuals who complies will be rewarded with $100. And this is paid by the ARP funding, which will be providing $100 to anyone who gets vaccinated, announced by the White House. And the president will call on every state, territory, and local government to use the ARP funding. Again, thank you. This is our weekly report, and we will see you again next Saturday.